There we go. Yeah, okay, cool. Just double checking that the mics are okay. Yeah, I think they look good.
Yeah.
All right, welcome to Tips from Your Boyfriend episode 18.
Wow.
Yeah. Definitely check us out on Instagram at Tips from Your Boyfriend and TikTok at Tips from Your Boyfriend. I just ruined everything that you did with my hair.
You're good.
And then at the Calliston on Twitter.
At Bethany Calliston on Instagram and TikTok.
Cool. And I think that we want to talk about a couple things today. But I don't think we ever discussed what are we gonna do for what's trending.
No, we didn't.
No. Tip of the day is to go work on your mobility, essentially. And I think that we wanted to talk about mobility, but in the context of yoga today. And mobility is a little bit different than flexibility. Flexibility is okay, you can touch your toes when you bend over, or sometimes you can even put your hands flat on the ground when you bend over. That's flexibility. Versus mobility, I think that you've always described as being able to utilize your range of motion when you do exercises.
Yeah, so it's passive versus active. So mobility means that you have the ability to move it yourself essentially without assistance. Mm-hmm. Whereas if it's flexibility, it's just very passive. So for the difference, a good example would be flexibility is you can jump into the splits, on command, no problem. You can hang out in a minute. You're flexible. Mm-hmm. But mobility is that you can actually lift that leg all the way yourself because you have that strength.
So right, so flexibility, you'd have to use your hands in order to bring your leg up or something like that, versus mobility is you can just bring that leg up on its own using the muscles in your legs.
So when I think about the difference between stretching and mobility, when I think of stretching, I generally think of just sitting in a stretch, quad stretch, right? Yeah. Just hanging out there for as long as you want. Whereas if I'm thinking about mobility, I'm thinking about I'm moving throughout my entire range of motion in my hip, or I'm doing something where I'm actively doing it.
Yeah. And so, the reason we talked about mobility is that I think mobility is another one of those things where it is protective of your body if you get decent at it. And so movements that might have injured you previously, just walking around or doing something, now if you're more mobile, you're stronger in more positions, and so you can kind of protect your body from injury and fixing yourself essentially.
Yeah, I love that you talk about that difference though, because I'm hypermobile and I've dislocated more times than I can count. And after the third time of dislocating my knees, I was a huge fan of yoga. I've been doing yoga since I was 18 years old, discovered it in college. I actually stopped doing yoga because I was thinking of yoga as stretching. And I was thinking about sinking as deep into the poses as I could. And because of that, I was actually afraid that I was damaging myself more than I was helping it, which was true because the way that I was doing yoga was just let me sink into this pose without actually using my muscles actively through it. And I remember talking to a friend who was a physical therapist, and I said, I really miss doing yoga, but because I'm hypermobile, I'm afraid of injuring myself while I'm doing it. And she said, if you think of yoga as strengthening instead of stretching, she's like, it'll be great for you because instead it becomes mobility where you're learning how to control the muscles while you're in a stretch. So you build that strength. Yeah. And instead of putting the joint at risk, you're actually supporting it. Yeah. So that was a game changer for me. And ever since I started using that mentality when I'm in yoga, I feel so strong because of it.
There's another reason why a lot of times people kind of think of yoga as, people don't like yoga. Some dudes are just no, I'm too masculine for yoga or something like that. But they don't realize that it's not just stretching where you go and you bend over and touch your toes the entire time. You're doing movements at the edge of your flexible range essentially. And so that becomes much more difficult. That's why when you go into yoga, all of a sudden you're doing these movements and it's really freaking hard. You know what I mean? It's you're going in there, you're stretching, you're putting yourself into a, I don't know, not a squat position, but a
chairs. Are you talking about chair?
Lunge position.
There you go.
You're putting yourself into a lunge. You're staying in the lunge, so where you've essentially stretched your legs kind of as far as they go, but then you're also doing all this mobility with your upper body while trying to do all of that. So it's you actually are getting a decent workout, and it's actually really fun. It's also once you get decent at it, and once you kind of get into the movements of it, you can kind of continuously push your mobility as far as you can, but at the same time, it becomes meditative and practice.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I'm anxious. Many of you know that. But when I am in yoga, I'm so in the moment that it's the most focused I can get outside of like breath work or other things similar to that. And I love that. My mind just goes clear. And I can just kind of be in the moment and the sensations, which is cool.
I love also how like yoga ends up in the news because like some pro NFL, like pro football player, pro basketball player goes out and says like, yeah, like the reason why I'm so good is because I do yoga, and like it just said yoga this, yoga NFL, yoga NBA, yoga this, and everyone's like, oh my god, maybe yoga's actually good or something.
Right? It's so funny how it takes like some buff, like amazing celebrity. It's funny that you bring that up too, because I actually had a client this morning who messaged me. She found some video of Madonna like way back in the day on an interview saying that all she did was yoga for workouts. And so she messaged me. She was just like, is it true that yoga actually builds muscle? And I was like, it's true. You can build muscle with it. I was like, however, I don't think that's the only thing that Madonna was doing.
Yeah.
I was like, I find that hard to believe, but no, I love it. And also kind of to your point about just moving in every direction too. In life, we don't just move forward and back. And I think a lot of times when we work out, we tend to just do squats or deadlifts or lunges and all things that are just going forward and back essentially. And we forget to rotate and strengthen those muscles. Yeah. Whereas yoga, it forces us through all ranges of motion, which is so protective of our bodies to prevent injury.
Yeah. And so like if you think that you're too manly to do yoga, think again.
Yeah. Well, that was a cultural difference between the coasts, between West Coast and East Coast, because where I'm from in the West Coast, guys do yoga and you get some jack dudes that would like go in there and they're super mobile and supple and I did not mind the eye candy when I was out there and it was great. And out here it's like mostly women and you'll be like token dude that's in there sometimes.
Tom Brady does yoga.
He does. Pliability. Where was I going with that? But yeah,
on the East Coast, it's a little different. You have a little bit on your teeth.
I don't know. Lentils?
I don't know what it is.
I'm gonna go fix it.
Okay. It's not that big of a deal.
It's a huge deal. Okay.
Yoga is kind of almost like not a basic level. Yoga is probably like can be kind of classified as a certain type of calisthenics, where usually when you go into like the fitness scene and you go on YouTube or go on like line and Google things and you think to yourself like, okay, I want to get more buff or ripped or something like that. I want to look like that guy that I saw. And like you look at somebody and you see like a bodybuilder, that has to be all weightlifting. I agree with them on that one. But then you might see somebody else online and like they've been doing calisthenics and like you see them doing like one-hand push-ups. They're doing like muscle ups, they're doing like handstand push-ups and all that kind of stuff, and that's like very calisthenics based. Yoga is essentially, I'm not going to put yoga into calisthenics, but it's essentially like a form of calisthenics almost. It's all body weight based. You usually don't use any sort of weights for it. And then instead of like focusing on building muscular strength and like repetitive movements, it much more focuses on strength with mobility and like flexibility in that sense. Yeah. It also focuses a lot on balance, but you'd need a lot of balance for calisthenics if you're going to go like hard into calisthenics.
Yeah. Also to a lot of isometric exercises where you're holding something for a sustained period, and that is really amazing for your joint health. Yeah. And building muscle too, honestly.
Yeah. Last thing I will say about like in terms of like the manliness of yoga is that it also focuses on proper body mechanics essentially. Yeah. So a lot of times when you go to the gym, you'll see like some kid doing bench press, right? And what they do is they go in there, they flare their like shoulders out like crazy and push really hard, right? And it's like, that's not proper body mechanics. They're gonna hurt themselves eventually, if not like very soon. And the reason why is because like they're moving their body in a way where they're trying to use leverage as much as possible. Versus just relying as much as possible on muscular strength. Yeah.
Or compensating for lack of mobility. If they physically can't get into the right position, I see a lot of people just finding weird ways of compensating, and you don't have to do that if you have mobility.
Right. And I see a lot of like compensating in legs. Like squats and that kind of stuff. Like, so many people compensate in squats and because they just can't do their squat form because they're just not mobile enough. Like they either don't have enough ankle mobility, or their hips are going to be a little bit too pinched, and like, or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And so like, one of the biggest things is the butt wink that everybody has in squats, and it's just like you're just missing mobility. If you're doing squats and you have a butt wink, number one, you're going too low because you don't have that flexibility and mobility to do that. And number two, it's like you should probably just reduce the weight a little bit and focus more on essentially being able to get into that position first before actually putting on weight and then doing that.
Yeah, a butt wink, just for reference, is where when you come to the bottom of the squat, if your butt kind of tucks under at the end. Yeah.
And what it does is it puts your spine into a precarious position. You'd really want to be protecting your spine while you're doing squats, but if you're doing a butt wink, your butt spine kind of bends at the bottom and you're losing a lot of the tension you need in order to protect it.
Yeah, that's one thing, that's the reason why I think everyone should be doing yoga, and there's different kinds of yoga for different strokes for different folks, right? But I think it's so good at getting you inside your body and knowing what it feels like, what feels good, what feels wrong. And I think a lot of people are very disconnected from being inside their bodies. I think a lot of people are very in their heads or anywhere else but inside of their actual body, and they don't know what that feels like. And I think that yoga is so great about getting you inside.
Yeah. And then once you start practicing yoga, on top of getting inside of it, it also doesn't destroy your ego, but it gives you an ego check in some sense.
Sure.
Because it's like...
very humbling.
Humbling in the sense that you go in there and... you as a new guy who's like been lifting for a while and like you're doing all these positions and you see some like 110-pound girl who has no muscle and she's able to do everything that you're doing but so much easier. You're like really struggling, but she's just doing it effortlessly.
Yeah, I remember I took a yoga class just as like a one-off college course, and the basketball team was in there and they were in the back and they were just like, whatever, I'm an athlete. Yeah. They were dripping sweat by the end of class and just like struggle busting. And it was just funny to see. It's just totally different use to your muscles.
And like athletes like that, typically I feel like have pretty decent mobility.
Yeah.
And so like even if when those kinds of athletes who have decent mobility are struggling, you realize that like somebody who's brand new is going to go in there who has no range of motion whatsoever. He's going to try to start doing yoga and they're just going to completely fail.
Yeah.
It's like kind of like... and it's important to make that person feel good about it and like tell them to come back because it's going to be really helpful for them in that sense.
Absolutely. And just a side tangent, a little pet peeve of mine, when I go to yoga class and I see someone who's either newer or not even newer necessarily, but just people who refuse to use blocks. That is like one of my biggest pet peeves, because I'll see people crunching into a pose that they have no business being in, when they could just grab a block and create space and actually feel good in the pose and feel what they're supposed to feel. And I feel like people, especially out here, kind of see it as like a cop out, like, oh, I'm like losing if I use the block. And that's such a pet peeve of mine. Use the blocks. It's just gonna feel better. I mean, I've been doing yoga for years. I'm super flexy and I still use blocks. So
it's like the equivalent of ego lifting.
Yeah.
It's like ego yogaing. Ego lifting is when like you go into the gym and you go onto like, I don't know, like the what do you call it? Like the let's say lat pull down machine. You go in the lat pull down machine, you put the weights down to like 1 billion pounds and you go in and you pull it really hard.
I'm such a badass.
Yeah, exactly. I think squats is the big one, actually. I feel like people ego lift in squats.
For sure.
They go in there, they put a bunch of like plates onto a squat rack or onto a bar, and they get under it, and they do like 1 or 2 squats with the worst possible fucking form, and they're going to hurt themselves.
Or really you see them just do like the tiniest range of motion, and they're like, I'm doing like so many reps of this, and you're like, you lowered 2 inches.
And the whole point, like the idea behind ego lifting is then you can go brag to your friends like, yeah, I squat 225 pounds. It's like, bro, you're moving like this far.
Can you though?
Your friends don't know, so they believe you that like, damn, you're squatting a lot of weight, but like you're really going to the gym and making a fool of yourself because everyone else is just like, buddy, like you're kind of defeating the whole purpose of lifting. Yeah,
absolutely. The other one I think for me is if you take a hot yoga class where you're just drenched in sweat, people who don't sip water.
Yeah.
Or people who think that it's weak to sip water. There's no point in dehydrating yourself. There benefits no one. You're not such a badass athlete for dehydrating. Every athlete hydrates, so why?
I don't know. Some people are hardcore like that.
Drives me nuts. I just want to like go and shake them. What are you doing?
Everyone has their own like things when they go to the gym. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or when they go to yoga.
Yeah.
Some people want to be like, I'm such a great yogi. Look at me.
That's
you
true.
Know what I mean?
The person who's like handstanding for no reason in the middle of a flow.
Or like my favorite one is when girls start doing like these kinds of movements with their hands. They're like, put your hands up. And I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
I've never noticed that. That's hilarious.
I've seen it a couple of times, and I'm just like, okay, go into a twist. And it's like, what are you doing?
That's hilarious. I've never noticed
The
that.
more
That's great.
I feel like a lot of people do it. The subtle one is when they go into like, you go from like half lift to like standing up fully.
Sure.
And they just bring their hands up like this.
Oh, that's funny.
And it's like, just put your fucking arms up.
Oh my gosh.
Movement, yes, movement's good here, but like this movement, there isn't really a bad way of doing the movement where you're like raising your arms, right? The whole point of like going all the way is to actually get some mobility up and like stretching your lats,
right?
And then also stretching out like your kind of front, but like staying also like tucked in.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's like.
That's hilarious. All right, I'm gonna go put the bread in the oven. I'm working on some gluten-free bread.
Nice. Yeah, we've been experimenting with gluten-free bread. If you guys don't know how hard gluten-free bread is to make, you first have to, it's not just wheat flour, right? It's like 10 different types of flour that you have to mix in together, and then you have to like do a completely new process in order to actually make bread. And so it becomes much, much more complicated and annoying to do.
It is such a pain in the butt.
And like it never turns out the same. And then for some reason, like it doesn't rise as well as wheat bread. And so like, it's an entire process. And obviously we can't really have gluten or wheat because she's gluten-free, and then she has celiac. And then apparently I went and took an allergy test, and it came back that I'm gluten sensitive, which I don't believe.
You are so gluten sensitive. He's been in denial for so long.
I've been eating a lot of gluten, and nothing's happened to me. I'm fine.
Hey, Google, set timer for 30 minutes.
Like whenever we go get burgers or something that has obviously gluten in the buns. Whenever I make dumplings, there's gluten in the dumplings. Whenever we do anything with gluten, I just eat all the gluten and I'm fine.
You say that you have no symptoms. He has this eczema on his hands that like legit flares up anytime he eats something that he's not supposed to eat. And anytime he eats gluten, it's like rashy. He's like, no, I wonder why it's a rash today. I wonder why I'm itchy.
That's not true. That's not true. Okay. Anyways.
It's okay. You do you, boo.
Yeah. So anyways, back to yoga. We were talking about like all those weirdos in yoga sometimes.
Yeah.
I think they're more or less, majority of the time, people who do yoga, they just do their own thing. And like they get into their own head. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I really like doing yoga personally. Mm-hmm. Is because, I don't want to call it meditative, but it's very similar where you get into, they call it your practice, your own practice. You go in, you do what's right for you, what feels good for your body, and just mentally, essentially unwind and relax almost.
Yeah.
And that way your mind is able to wander, your mind is able to focus on your breathing, your mind is able to focus on your stretching, your mobility, like your poses, and like really get into kind of more state where like outside influences don't really affect it too much.
Yeah.
And that's why people like to call it meditative, because you're able to kind of focus your mind and relax it to the point of like almost meditation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate too that it's a spiritual practice as well, that it reminds you that there's, you know, something bigger than yourself, and kind of reminding you that you're more than just a human body and bones and muscles and all the things. And I really appreciate that it brings awareness to that.
And like a lot of different, I know that yoga around the world really does emphasize on the spiritual, honestly. Mm-hmm. And so like when you do yoga training, I'm sure like they teach you all
Yeah.
about that. I know that here, especially on the East Coast, it's a very physical thing where like we actually take one of the easiest yoga classes that's available at our gym. It's called root yoga, right? And it's like they don't do any sort of complicated poses. They don't do any sort of complicated flows or anything too difficult. They really focus on getting into a pose, really feeling out the pose, really understanding the body mechanics of that pose, and then moving on from that one to the next one and taking our time going from one to the other. So it really isn't too complicated or difficult or hard to do, but it's very beneficial, I think, and I prefer this much more than the other ones.
I agree. I would much rather move at a slower pace and have a chance to actually know what I'm engaging and be very conscious about my movement and being in it than just flailing around, which I feel like it becomes like that, where it becomes this really weird choreography where you're just flowing from one thing to the next and you don't actually get a chance to actually be in the pose and feel what it's supposed to feel like and get the benefits from it. So I really love that we dial it down to basics really and just have a chance to actually enjoy what it feels like to be in a certain position.
And I think that like if the flow yoga is like the next level where it becomes much faster. I feel you need a really solid base of yoga already in order to actually do flow. Flow, you already need mobility because if you can move from one position or one pose to another, you need to be able to move your body without kind of like having to compensate to move your body.
Yeah.
I know that in our class, we get into plank and then we have to, not plank, we're in downward dog. We put our leg backward and then we have to step forward with our leg, right? And she always says like, yep, just move your legs between your hands and then like however many times you need to kind of jump your leg up and down, it's fine. But in reality, once you get more mobile, you should be able to go straight from downward dog and put your leg all the way in between your hands and just step in like in the plank position without having to do it multiple times or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so like, that's what happens when you're mobile. You can actually move your leg to where it has to be versus if you're relatively new, you don't have the flexibility or the strength to do it.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of do it multiple times over and over again.
That's what I love too, is you get to see the progress of moving where something is really difficult for you to having something feel easy. Not easy, but to move with ease, essentially. I remember I used to hate warrior one pose where your back foot's kind of turned out and your front foot is forward in 90 degrees and your hips are ideally supposed to be squared. That felt so uncomfortable for me for the longest, and finally it got to a point where I realized I was getting to the pose easily and didn't even realize it, and I was like, oh hey, I'm progressing.
Yeah. But then I think that like as you progress, then you can get to like a faster flow.
Yeah.
If you can't even do the basics and can't do the movements and go like smoothly from one pose to another, how are you supposed to do it fast?
Yeah, you're not.
You're not.
You can't.
And so like you do it slow, you gain some strength in those positions by holding those positions. And then once you gain that strength and once you gain that smoothness, then you can start to speed it up.
Yeah, that's why I'm a huge fan of Hatha yoga classes or ones that are explicitly Hatha yoga because, or even Iyengar too, but where you're actually going to sit in that pose for a little bit instead of just, to your point, vinyasa flow where it can be quite rigorous. Or Ashtanga is very intense.
And then you get people who don't know what the fuck they're doing and going to like vinyasa flow and they're just flailing around.
It's frightening, so frightening. I'm just like watching my eyes burn everywhere I look. I'm like, oh God.
Because the instructor puts like 10 poses in a row that you're supposed to flow through with your breathing. Like you breathe into one pose and then when you're breathing out, you shift to another pose and then you breathe into another pose. And it's supposed to look very smooth. And you're supposed to be able to activate the correct muscles and get like feel like you're like in like a good like I don't know, in a good place.
Sure.
But then like you see all these people who don't know how to do yoga really, who don't have the flexibility or the mobility, and they're just flailing from one pose to another. And so it looks super jagged. It looks super like they're struggling, and yet they continue to do it because they feel like, oh, I'm an advanced yoga person.
Yeah.
It's like an ego thing once again, you know what I mean? Like when you're doing yoga, you're supposed to really leave your ego at the door. And so just do yoga for you. And like the more you do it, the longer you do it, the stronger you'll get. And so the more advanced stuff you can do. But the advanced part, the advancedness or like the difficulty of yoga is not the point.
Yeah. Absolutely.
For most people anyways.
Because the thing is, like, if you're modifying, it's going to be difficult regardless. Like, no matter what you're doing, whatever level you're at, you're going to have feels. So, yeah, kind of embracing it.
I agree.
Also, shout out to Chingis's kombucha that he made. It is so good. He, like, nailed it to the point where it's carbonated and it tastes a lot like the Brew Doctor one. No, not Brew Doctor. Trilogy. Yeah, GT. It's so good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we'll have to do an episode where we show how you make it.
That's that liberal shit.
You're going to have to expand on that one, babe. Inside joke.
It's an inside joke, yeah, but I'll expand on it later. For those who don't know, kombucha is essentially a fermented drink. What did I used to call it? I was like a fermented soda. No. It's almost like a healthy soda. It doesn't have any of the high fructose corn syrup or anything like that. And it is not artificially carbonated. It's natural carbonation because of fermentation. And so like if you're drinking Coke or drinking something else and you want to kind of like get out of the habit of doing that, getting kombucha is probably like a decent way of doing it. Yeah. Like it still has a little bit of sugar in it. But that's because of the brewing process, like the fermentation is when the yeasts and bacteria go in there and they transform sugar into oftentimes carbon dioxide and other things. And so like the sugar that's added to it is really to feed the bacteria and yeast, the probiotics that are in there to make that makes it healthy. And so while they replicate and like become like a larger colony, they're the ones that probiotic mix is going to be what's healthy for you. Sorry, babe, my nose is so itchy. I know.
They're like those rabbits that are just like.
I know, but they just yeah. So GT's is a really good brand. Check out GT's. I think you can buy it at most stores.
I would say
now.
Whole Foods, Target, yeah, anywhere.
Our favorite is the guava and the trilogy flavors.
Yeah.
Those are the two we pretty much buy only.
Guava's my fave.
Yeah. And then excuse me, babe. Sorry, it's just, my nose is so itchy. I want to try not to itchy.
You're good. So we wanted to talk about expectation versus reality in relationships.
Nice segue.
Which is going to be a fun one, yeah.
Expectations versus reality of relationships. Mm-hmm. So it's like what you expected a relationship to be like versus what the reality of the relationship is.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to start with this one?
Sure. So I was single pretty much all of my 20s, and I remember friends trying to make me feel better by telling me, oh, being in a relationship is so hard. You should just enjoy this time of being single. You're living your best life. Sometimes I wish I was still single, and just relationships are hard, work. And so I have been told that pretty much my whole life. And even going to like church services where they talk about relationship and things like that, and just like the work that it takes to make a relationship. And I kind of came in with this mentality, and I don't feel that way at all. I feel like if it's that hard and if it requires that much work for you, you're with the wrong person. Because I feel like, yeah, absolutely, you have to grow together and you have to figure out how to communicate and how to work together as a team and how you guys are as a unit. But it shouldn't be hard. Like, it shouldn't be like you're just rolling up a ball up a hill. You get that analogy, right?
Yeah.
Boulder, that's the word.
Yeah.
And so that was something that was just totally different for me because I kind of came in with this expectation of like, oh, it's just going to be such a grind, and it's not.
Mm-hmm. Which is a good thing, honestly. Because like, if your expectation of something that's supposed to be difficult and then you actually get into it and it's relatively easy, it's like, oh, that's kind of great.
Yeah, absolutely. It was just like, what are people talking about?
I heard that a lot, honestly. I feel like a lot of my friends, when I talk to them, they don't always, but they'll go into a relationship and they'll complain about their relationship constantly. You know what I mean? And then like, I'm just wondering to myself, like, why do you complain all the time about like your spouse? It's like you almost don't want to be in that relationship. Mm-hmm. And they feel maybe a social expectation to be in it. And I think to myself, like, don't have the expectation or the social expectation to be in a relationship if you don't want to be in one. But then, like, once you're in one, if you're miserable, like, I don't understand that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think maybe the reason why you're miserable too is I think kind of going back to the idea of expectations themselves. Sometimes we can create this idea in our head of what we expect it to be like. And if it doesn't live up to that exact image that we have, then we feel disappointed.
Yep.
And so I think sometimes if we're not careful, we can fall into that.
I think a lot of people also have like a combative attitude with their other person, with the person they're in a relationship with.
Me versus you.
Me versus you, essentially. It's not like a us versus the problem. It's like very much like, oh, you're the problem. The other person thinks, no, you're the problem. And like we start butting heads the entire time. And like once you're in that kind of mindset, sorry. I can't. Once you're in that kind of mindset, it becomes a little bit more difficult to get out of it.
Babe.
Just gonna.
He's like this at no other time during the day.
Yeah, I'm just gonna moisturize my nose
when we're filming. It's like
moisturize my nose. Maybe the itching will go away. Yeah. But I don't know. Like, I've seen a lot of relationships blow up because of that. Like, you get to like these insurmountable conflicts, almost, and you just can't get over them. And I feel like that's what I was expecting going into some relationships. And so I thought to myself, like, that's kind of what I have to deal with. But then again, it's supposed to be difficult, right? But then you get into a relationship like our relationship, and it's really easy. I feel like we don't really have too many like issues like at all.
No.
And the ones that were issues were like insignificant, like freaking living room furniture.
It's true. I mean, we definitely had an adjustment period when we first moved in together. I think that we had to kind of figure out how to integrate our lives and getting used to each other's like.
Yeah.
For sure. Like that was a big adjustment for sure. But again, adjustment, I wouldn't consider that just like constant conflict or constant work or like.
Agree. Like beforehand, you're used to just having your own space and doing whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
And then like you get into a relationship, you move in together, you all of a sudden have to share space with another person.
Yeah.
So your habits might be different from their habits, and you have to figure out how this freaking
integrate,
works.
Yeah. But I mean, that's really the only thing that I can kind of think of that felt a little more hard. But even then, like I said, it isn't what people had kind of let it to seem like it would be.
Mm-hmm. So when I was younger, I think that for the record, I think that the phrase I feel like is a very millennial thing to say. So my generation, our generation, has kind of gotten into the habit of saying I feel like instead of I think that.
Yeah.
Essentially replacing thought with feelings, kind of, like on a surface level. But I think that people say I feel like because they seem to... it's hard to like continuously say I feel like and I think that. I think that people say I feel like to be less offensive about what they want to say. You know what I mean? Like when they want to have something they say land a little softer, they say like, oh, I feel like this, and this, instead of I think this, and this.
I could see that, being a little more emotionally intelligent, so to speak.
Yeah, they think that it's a little bit less aggressive.
Sure.
They feel like it's a little less aggressive. Versus like the most aggressive way of stating something, this is how it is.
Yeah.
The middle ground is I think this is how it is. And the softest is I feel like this is how it is. And all those are still assertive. The non-assertive way is like, maybe it's like this.
That sounds so wishy-washy, though.
I agree.
So wishy-washy.
It's a little bit of a cop-out, too. Like, you don't have any strong feelings about it. So you say, maybe it's how it is, maybe.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't fucking care.
Going back to expectation versus reality.
Yeah, sorry, excuse me. Where was I? Oh, when I was younger. I think that when I was younger, before any sort of my serious relationships, I didn't have too much expectations of what relationships were supposed to be like. And so I wasn't sure, not even how to maintain a relationship, but I wasn't sure how to, like a romantic relationship. I wasn't sure how to maintain like a new kind of friendship or relationship. Like I had my friends. Me and my friends are comfy being friends with each other. We have like a lot of the same personality traits. We have a lot of the same hobbies. We have a lot of the same stuff. So it's very easy to be friends with people like that because you just talk about the same stuff all day. You have all the same experiences, and then like it's very easy. Versus when you get into a relationship with somebody you've never known before who might be completely different from you because like you're attracted to each other, it's difficult because you can't rely on all the same things that you were doing before.
Interesting.
And so you have to learn how to be in a romantic relationship at that point. And if nobody's taught you, you're going to stumble from one relationship to another, being like, oh, I failed this relationship because of this reason. So like I'm going to do this in my next one. And then you go from one failed relationship to another until you kind of figure out what's going on.
Yeah. I think part of my problem was that I came into dating with the expectation of every person that I dated was a potential life partner. But because I had that expectation, there was so much weight on, well, what if I make the wrong choice? Or what if I would just write people off too quickly because I was so afraid of like, you know, choosing the wrong life partner or whatever. And so I would push people away, and that just ruined my whole like romantic life. So I think what was different about you and I was I had finally switched my thinking from, you know, oh, this has to lead to marriage, or I hope it does, to I'm just going to enjoy this. This is going to be fun, and let's see where it goes. And I'm just going to come in from a place of curiosity and, you know, wanting to get to know you and just enjoying it. And what a difference that made.
Yeah. It's a very different kind of approach between being a girl versus being a boy, I feel like, in a romantic relationship.
I agree.
With like dating. Like when I first started dating and I had my first girlfriend, we like had the talk where we're now girlfriend and boyfriend. And I was sitting there being like, now what? What do we do?
That's funny. You and I actually never had that talk. He never once asked me to be his girlfriend. And so randomly one day he introduced me as his girlfriend, or said something like, no, you're my girlfriend. And I was like, I am?
Well, we never had like the official, excuse me, sorry, babe. Like, we never had the official kind of labeling of the relationship.
Yeah.
But it's what happened. We're exclusive. Like, why not be boyfriend, girlfriend?
Yeah.
It's easy enough.
It's just that no one had ever like asked me before to be their girlfriend, and so it's like I wasn't sure like how that went.
Right.
I was like waiting for it, and I was like, are we? Aren't we? And then you're like, girlfriend. And I was like, what? I'm gonna get you a face spray. Hold on.
I don't know. Like, it's just itching so bad right now. I think it's whenever I get put in front of a camera, honestly.
You're about to have a glow up, babe.
Now what?
Hopefully that's something else for
Do
you
I
to
rub
think
it
about.
in, or?
No, just leave it. There. Just, it'll give you something else to think about, and you're a little more moisturized.
Okay, got it.
We'll see if this works. Otherwise, your skin will be glowy. That was Tata.
Really
This is Tata Harper, for anyone who wants it. The floral essence. Very wonderful.
Thanks, babe.
Great during winter.
Coming back to me. When I was younger, I got failed relationship after failed relationship because I didn't understand what you're supposed to do in a relationship. Like, I didn't understand, like, okay, well, you hang out with them, and then you're like, okay, see you next week or something.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yikes.
I didn't know.
That's funny.
And so, like, I had a girlfriend, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, okay, that's nice. And I just go on with my normal life.
Meanwhile, the girl on the other side is like, does he love me? Does he not? Has he forgotten about me?
I would go almost days without ever reaching out or talking to her.
See, me being on the other end of that, I dated a guy that was similar to you, where he would just fall off and then out of the blue be like, hey, how's it going? And like, I would just be racked in between because I was like, okay, well, I guess it's over. I guess he got bored of me. And then out of nowhere, he'd pop up, hey, how are things? And I'd be like, oh, we're still good.
I didn't know. You know what I mean? I just didn't know.
That's really funny.
it's not like I had any sort of like mentor or somebody else who'd like teach me how to do these things.
Yeah.
And I'm sure like with my parents, it's like they had completely different dating rules back where they're from.
Yeah.
So like, what was I
Absolutely.
supposed to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe
No.
I was supposed to like watch more movies and pick it up from that, but like I didn't like rom-coms and stuff like that when I was younger.
Sure. Yeah, it's true. If you don't have that model of what that's supposed to look like, and I feel like the dating phase, like you don't really ever get to see that from someone. Like you get to see them as a couple, but you never really see like initial stages of dating or things like that. You can hear about it, but
Yeah. That and it's like you're a teenager too. Like, why would you ask your parents for like that kind of information?
yeah,
It's like that's probably the last thing you want, unless
Yeah.
they like volunteer. You know what I mean?
it's true. Yeah. I also thought too that I had to be like perfect at all times. That was something that which probably came off as me having a stick up my butt. I feel like sometimes.
Perfect's boring too.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what it was. And it was funny too, because also one of my deepest fears is people finding me boring. But, and so I kind of became that in a weird way. But yeah, I felt like I couldn't put my guard down. I had to show you my best self. And I remember one time I read this book by, I think it was Brene Brown, and she was talking about how she and her husband got into this ridiculous fight, very similar to like our furniture arranging fight, just some ridiculous fight.
Yeah.
And he was so good to her after this fight, and he just like spoiled her and loved on her, and she just couldn't believe it. Like she had been so petty, and he just showed so much compassion and grace for her. And I remember just being so enraged when I read that story, because I was like, I try to be perfect at all times, and I'm putting out my best self, and I can't find a single person to love me. Like, and I just remember feeling like really hopeless when I read that, actually, because I just felt like I'm trying to be perfect, and
Yeah.
I couldn't even let myself be petty, because, I really wouldn't have anyone. And of course you changed all that, but yeah, which is amazing, because we've had very many petty fights, including skiing with our future kids and all that, but which is so funny to me now. But yeah, looking back, that was a big one for me as far as like expectation versus reality.
But yeah. Good. I'm glad. You don't have to be perfect, babe. Don't be perfect. Perfect is boring. Be quirky. Quirky is not the right word. Just be yourself. I realize that a lot of people, when they hear the kind of advice like be yourself, don't really understand what it means. So like you have the expectation of like, what does be yourself mean? Well, it's like, don't be the worst version of yourself. You know what I mean? Oftentimes people think to themselves like, oh, be myself. It means I have to make no effort whatsoever.
Yeah.
Be yourself means just be the best version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you have interests, keep all those same interests. You know what I mean? But make yourself attractive to the baseline. And the baseline means like, okay, well, you're hygienic. You know what I mean? You brush your teeth every day. You shower every day. You clean up after yourself. You don't smell. You generally have your kind of life together in terms of your hygiene, on top of like other things. And that's like the baseline. Don't live in a pigsty. Don't look yourself like a pigsty. Have your own look, honestly. Like you don't have to be like this boring person that puts on like a button-up shirt every day. But like, have your own look. Just be clean. Don't be dirty the entire time. And like if somebody tells you that you smell, and to deal with that kind of situation.
Yeah.
Be yourself doesn't mean to be dirty.
Yeah.
There's other aspects to it too. But like when your expectations of a relationship happen, it's like what So says be yourself in order to get into a relationship. That generally means be your best self.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is leaning into the things that light you up, and the things that really make you full, like just fill you up essentially. So whatever you love and brings you joy, like that's the kind of person that's going to like draw people to you essentially, because you're just going to be so like, yeah, magnetic in a way.
Kind of.
I think it's important. I think it's like, it's so important to have things that you're passionate about, and yeah, things that light you up. I think that's a huge part of you being you.
Yes. Yes. I think when people like, I was taking this as kind of a different direction. When I say be yourself, definitely keep all the things that you're interested in, keep those around. Don't all of a sudden pick up some generic interest just because everybody else likes that, or you think that everybody else likes that, or so you think that you should like that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
That's dumb. Like, keep like your passions, and people will appreciate that, generally speaking. But also bring other aspects of your life to a certain baseline so that people don't think that you're neglecting those things in your life.
Sure.
Like,
Oh my God, babe.
sorry, babe, sorry. Like, I don't know why this comes to mind, but like with cliches with artists, right? Some savant artist who like it puts all their time and energy into their art, and like the rest of their life is a complete wreck. You know what I mean? Like, their art might be amazing, but then they're an alcoholic. They never take care of themselves. They don't make any money, so they can't like do anything, all that kinds of stuff. And so it's like, well, yes, they're passionate about something. They might draw somebody in because art is sexy, but then like their entire rest of their life is a wreck. So be yourself, really focus on your art, do whatever, but then you have to have a baseline and everything else.
Yeah.
Where it's like, yes, like you can live in a messy place, but at least be like relatively like clean messy. I don't know how to put it. You know what I mean? Like I'm relatively clean messy in the sense that like I have a huge hamper where I put mountains and mountains of like dirty clothes, and then like after like this hamper fills up, or after I run out of underwear, essentially, I do all my laundry, and then I have a laundry pile with all my clean laundry. You know what I mean? My laundry isn't like strewn all over the apartment, all that kind of stuff. I have a big pile of clean laundry, and then I have a hamper of dirty laundry.
Yeah, but like, what is that in the context of a relationship, though? Like, are you talking about like once you're with someone, not letting yourself go, or like I'm a little bit confused as far as like where you're going with that, or are you talking about like not losing yourself in a relationship once you're in it and letting everything else go to the wayside?
I was specifically expanding on the advice that people give to be yourself.
Right.
So someone's expectation of what be yourself means in the context of getting into a romantic relationship. You know what I mean? Like, so when people complain all the time, it's like, oh, I can't find a girlfriend, or I can't find a boyfriend.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, okay, well, just be yourself and put yourself out there.
Yeah.
But it's like when people hear be myself, it's like, I'm freaking myself. Like, what's wrong with me? You know what I mean?
Got it,
It's
yeah.
like, no, it's like, when someone says be yourself, they don't mean live in a pigsty.
Yeah.
Like, if you are yourself in a pigsty, that's not okay.
Yeah. Got it.
You can't also associate your ego, like, this is me, like pigsty, you know what I mean? It's like, no, like, your freaking messy, dirty, moldy apartment is not an identity thing.
I do remember a guy that I dated, and we stopped at his house before going out to dinner, and like just his shower towel was just laying on the ground, and he had laundry everywhere, and I was just like, whoa.
Right.
Yeah, that was not great. Hold on.
And so it's like the expectation of
Google.
like dating advice then becomes like,
Hey Google, stop timer. That didn't rise at all.
no,
No,
the color looks good. Color looks good.
it's not gonna be good. That did not rise. Let's see.
Maybe the yeast is just dead or something.
Something. I don't know.
Anyways,
Boo.
that's kind of like on a tangent. Like, it's less of like expectations of relationships, it's more of expectations of like what it means to be yourself.
Sure.
I'm going like on like a kind of like a weird offshoot.
Yeah. Okay.
And my nose is so itchy. So.
I was gonna say I've never seen you like this before.
No, it's so bad.
Did you take your allergy meds today?
I did.
I feel like we need to like just like Aquaphor up your nose or something before coming on.
I agree. Something.
That's funny. What other expectations did you have?
Before relationships?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I honestly went into it kind of completely blind.
Yeah.
And then just stumbled into like relationship after relationship and like didn't know what the hell fuck was going on.
I will say one thing that I had as an expectation was that going on double dates was just like an easy thing to do, of like, well, if you and I are friends, and clearly our significant others are going to be friends too.
Yeah.
And that it's just going to be super easy for the four of us to like hang out. And it's just funny because when you go on double dates, you can get some weird dynamics going on. I was like, oh, I did not know this was a thing.
Yeah. Oftentimes also, like, for some reason, guys on double dates just don't care.
Yeah, I
They
remember
don't put
you
in
telling me
any
that.
effort.
Yeah.
They're like, oftentimes guys will go into it and be like, I don't really want to be here. I don't want to know who you are, so I'm really not going to put into effort or talk to you or do anything. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to count down the time until we leave, be relatively polite, and then just be out of there.
Yeah.
And like you on the other side of things, like you kind of go in being like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Yeah. It's not fun.
It's like, I'm talking to a rock. It doesn't want me talking to it. And
yeah.
I'm getting like the stone wall treatment. And I'm like, all right, well, it's fine.
It can go both ways because I've definitely experienced that from like the girl side of things too, where it's just like, okay. For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any stream of thoughts today? Anything on your mind?
I don't know why I went on like, such a tangent about like that be yourself advice.
That was funny.
Yeah.
No, I'm like spitting everywhere. We're a hot mess today.
We
Between
are.
us and the bread and then the nose and tangents. We're good. We're good.
I don't know. Stream of thoughts. When I go on Reddit and browse like social media nowadays, all I see is politics. And it's like we're in an election year, so I understand. But like I don't see any like health topics or anything like that, right?
Wow.
But then even when I do go on Twitter and like search out health topics, it's all BS. You know what I mean? It's like people aren't even trying to like say like, I don't know. They give like the most outlandish advice.
Yeah.
And I can't give you an example off the top of my head right now, but it just becomes more and more about like getting people's attention. You know what I mean? Saying whatever gets people's attention instead of just telling them straight to their face, like, no, go to the gym. Someone's like, oh no, I don't want to go to the gym, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, go to the gym.
Sure.
Listen, if you were 15 years old and I was your father, I would just sit your ass in the car and we're just going to the gym.
Sure. Yeah, I think we're on very different sides of the spectrum because my social media is very, like, chosen people who I follow who are just very much in the health and wellness world. So I get almost zero politics unless something very polarizing comes up. And most of it's from a health and wellness perspective. And so you and I have a very different approach. But I agree with you, though, of even then, people just kind of jumping on trends or just doing the most extreme thing and saying like, hey, this is really great for you. Or they'll do something that's extremely expensive that most people can't relate to or afford. And for me, I'm like, why are you almost shaming people out of wellness, making them feel like, well, I can't do this, and so I'm just doomed to be fat and unhealthy the rest of my life. And just no practical examples of healthy living, of just, hey, if you stay consistent with the basics, you're going to be good.
Yeah. They see somebody who's like a relatively healthy, fit individual, and they go up to them like, how'd you do that? They don't want to hear, 2 years of hard work.
Yeah.
They want to be like, buy this supplement and you'll look like it.
Totally. Yep.
And then that's like what they expect and that's what they hear. And that's like, a lot of people would be like, I don't want to do that even.
Yeah. That's why I hate the term biohacking, because everyone thinks that there's a cheat code to being healthy, and there's not.
Now there kind of is, Ozempic.
Oh, God. Don't get me started on Ozempic, but...
Yeah, that shows up in the, I've seen some articles every now and then on Ozempic. I saw an article, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, about how gyms are dealing with people who are on Ozempic nowadays.
Wow,
yeah.
Interesting.
And there was a bunch of people talking about it. Generally, I don't think they would have published something that talked poorly about it, because then they would like have a lawsuit on their ass. But people were relatively positive about Ozempic. For those that don't know, Ozempic is a diabetes drug.
Yeah.
Which...
Who doesn't know about Ozempic?
Which, one of its other purposes is a weight loss drug.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how it works, but it basically just crushes your appetite, right?
Yeah, it's injections that you have to get done either weekly or monthly. I can't remember which. And it just completely suppresses the way that you have your appetite and everything like that. But in the meantime, I think it's going to ruin your pancreas, mess with your insulin levels, mess up your liver, and does all these other things that no one ever talks about. Because, yeah, and then poor people who have diabetes, now they have competition for getting their drug, and of course it's probably driving up their prices even more. So I'm not a fan.
Yeah, making it more difficult for them to get it too.
Yeah, and then of course you can never go off of it once you go on it. Oh, babe, we need to wrap this up.
Yeah, soon.
This is rough.
But anyways, about Ozempic. Everybody always talks about the positives of Ozempic, right? Everyone's just like, oh, we have this obesity epidemic in America. If everybody was on Ozempic, everybody will lose weight, and then maybe health outcomes will be better also.
Yeah.
Maybe. Who knows?
I think you're going to get...
It's not a healthy kind of like societal trend or nor a healthy habit to be in, because then you're just dependent on it, you know what I mean? But...
Well, and you lose all the health benefits of being at a healthy weight too, right? Because if you're doing a cheat code to be skinny, essentially, you're losing the benefits of working out or eating right that would be cancer preventative, diabetes preventative, and then also too depression, right? So if you're overweight, your mood isn't going to be as great as it could be because you're not having endorphins from working out and other things that come with that. And so you lose all those benefits. So it's like, I feel like people think, once I lose weight, I'm going to be happier. I think that's what a lot of people think.
Yeah.
Once I'm skinny, I'm going to be happy. And I think a lot of people are going to miss out on that and just be very depressed.
I don't know if it's be happier. I believe it stems from the fact that people feel like once I lose weight, people will treat me better. And so I feel that's probably likely depending on how much weight you're going to be losing.
I don't know. I don't believe that because I've seen people through some pretty extreme weight loss things. I've seen people who have lost weight because they worked hard at it and they earned it. And I've seen people who have lost weight through other means, whether it was taking drugs, whether it was getting sick, actually, and losing a lot of weight because they got sick and it was an unhealthy way of losing it. And their happiness factor does not go up in those situations. They just kind of get like down in a way.
But they'll subtly probably be treated differently comparatively before and after.
Sure, but I don't know if that really impacts your happiness.
Maybe, maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it might impact your psyche a bit. Like when you meet new people or talk to strangers or talk to like, I don't know, service workers, right? On one hand, they might treat you poorly and like ignore you or don't want to talk to you. On the other hand, they come up to you and smile and say nice things and all that kind of stuff, you know. I think it's probably likely you might find some social benefit to losing weight, no matter which way you do it, whether Ozempic or not. I think that on Ozempic, you'll probably not get any sort of health benefits out of it. And it might be harmful to your body, like your pancreas and your liver and all that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to recommend it.
I think it's terrible. I hate that they made that available to people, and I hate that they market drugs to the general public. That to me is just it's only legal here and in Germany. Those are the only countries where you can market prescription drugs to general population.
Yeah.
And I hate that, and I feel like it should be illegal, just like everywhere else.
Yeah.
But
direct marketing.
Yeah.
Direct to consumer marketing.
Yeah.
Because in other countries you can only market drugs to doctors. Mm-hmm. Because doctors will understand it, you know what I mean? Doctors are the ones that prescribe it.
Yeah.
And so you're essentially selling the drugs to doctors, and then the doctors are the ones who are trying to like essentially apply those drugs to their populations.
Yeah.
And so that makes much more sense. But direct-to-consumer marketing is, they call it educational. And so like that way the consumer, the patient, essentially goes into the doctor and talks to them about the drugs instead of the other way around. I don't like it. Generally speaking, the general population doesn't know anything about drugs whatsoever. And so they're wildly undereducated about it.
Yeah.
And they should not be making choices about those kind of things in order to do it.
Absolutely.
But on topic of Ozempic, I don't recommend it. But I also understand why people do it. It's not a good thing, I don't think.
No.
You know what I mean? It just contributes to the kind of like, I'm not gonna say degeneracy, but it contributes to like poor habits and poor kind of cultural decline, cultural, freaking, what is it called? You know what I mean? If we had like a culture of like fitness, where from a young age, we get messaging from everywhere, from your teachers, from your parents, from all your friends, from like all the commercials and all that, that fitness is important, fitness is good, fitness is going to be healthy for everybody. And we had a culture of fitness and also a culture of like good diet, where like we don't see freaking commercials from McDonald's constantly all day, every day. We don't see like some sort of messaging like, oh, eat this high sugary food, it's actually healthy for you. And like we actually had people who are like coming in there and like actually wanting to be healthy and understanding that it's good to be healthy and like not treating unhealthiness as something normal. That'd be so much better for us comparatively to like Ozempic, where it's like, oh, well, look at our culture and people don't want to change and people don't like value fitness anyways. And so like, but here's a quick fix for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, let's sugar up the population. And then when the population is fat and miserable, let's give them Ozempic to make them skinnier. But then like everybody who's on Ozempic now is dependent on Ozempic. The moment they get off it, all of a sudden their bad habits, because they didn't change, they're gonna like get all the bad results of their bad habits. And then like they're gonna just market a new drug in the future that's also gonna be like a weight loss drug or like a happy drug. You know what I mean? Oh, it sucks. It's important that when you have kids, as much as possible to teach them good habits, teach them to prioritize healthy living and to identify essentially marketing, you know what I mean, manipulative marketing that goes in there and tries to trick them into doing something that's against their best behavior. Every single Coca-Cola commercial is manipulative marketing to make them drink Coke. Coke is like one of the least freaking healthy things for you. You know what I mean? So like when they market Coke and they like have like all those people like super happy drinking Coke and all that kinds of stuff, you gotta look at that shit as like something that's absolutely awful for society and awful for everybody there. You know what I mean? Don't drink Coke. It's fucking awful for you. Don't drink soda. My favorite moment recently, like I just thought of this, was when Ronaldo went and did a press interview. Soccer player. He was sitting up front and there was a product placement in front of him of soda. He like takes the soda, moves it away, puts out water. He's like, drink water, puts it down. And I think it was Coke that was out there, right? Coke's stock price dropped like 5% immediately from that.
It did.
And there was like this huge like media like outrage about it, how he's just like, he wasn't like supposed to do that, like he might get sued by Coke now, blah, blah, blah. It's like, good. I hope Coke goes out of business.
Yeah, absolutely. It just, going back to, and more so than teaching, modeling. It's like you have this person who's this athlete superstar that everyone looks up to, who's modeling good health in front of them instead of just falling into the culture. And then
the worst part about it is that he might actually get sued by the lawyers at Coke, which is absolute horseshit. Excuse me. Sorry, I keep swearing this.
I was going to say, we're like... we're a hot mess.
I don't know. You can't stop companies from Coke from selling their products if they're going to be like, if they're not going to kill you, essentially, right? But we should be able to stop them from manipulative marketing. Because like ever since a young age, your kids get on a phone or something else, they're immediately going to see advertisements for all this kind of stuff. And like you can't get around it.
I get that. Ugh.
This is why I also try to keep like advertisements as much as I can out of my life.
This bread did not rise.
It looks good from here.
No, it doesn't. That is gonna be like a brick, like legit.
Is it?
It's like a brick. This is going into the trash.
No, hold on. Let it cool. Let it cool. Let it cool.
Yeah.
Give it an hour.
I have a brick. It's just a solid loaf that did not rise. Which the part that's like very angering about this loaf of bread is the fact that I did the exact same thing as before, and it's come out totally different.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it could be dead yeast or something. I don't know, but
maybe.
My stream of thought is baking gluten-free bread is very infuriating.
I know. I'm proud of you for keeping at it.
Once I figure it out, it will be so relieved. But getting there, oh my gosh, it's time consuming. It's lots of dishes. Oh.
I keep saying that I'll try it, but maybe one day.
Watch, you're gonna try it and come out with like the perfect loaf.
I don't know. It's like
so mad, but not.
it's not like I grew up with my mom making bread. Like I think she picked up making bread like much later.
Yeah, but
like,
that's gluten bread. Anyone can make gluten bread. That's not a fair comparison.
I guess, yeah.
Not a fair comparison.
I don't know. We'll see. I'll try it one day.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I'd be curious.
Yeah. I'm sorry about your frustration.
You're good.
All right, any last thoughts?
No.
I'm done with my Coke rant.
You're good. Yeah. I don't think there was anything really that was too much on my mind. So yeah.
All right.
Cool.
Well, this has been Tips from Your Boyfriend, episode 18. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Tips from Your Boyfriend. I'm on Twitter at the Calston.
And Instagram and TikTok for me at Bethany Calston.
Yeah, and we'll see you next time. When is next time?
Wednesday?
Yeah, maybe Wednesday. We'll announce ahead of time.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in.